Fix errors, waste, and issues in a couple of clicks. Get alerted whenever you're off track. Sign up at trueclicks.com.
Wix Studio, the platform for agencies and enterprises to manage clients and projects with max efficiency, sharing Wix's SEO tech to help you drive growth.
Hi everybody, I'm Dave Cousin. I'm the head of organic at Oban International, and we are an agency based here in Brighton, but working globally. And I've come here today to talk to you about TW Bert, or term weighting Bert, why it's great news for us as users of search engines, but also why it's great news for us as SEOs, or rather good SEOs. We're all good SEOs here, right? There's no bad SEOs about, so it's good news for us. Before I move on though, can I see a show of hands who feels that they know what term weighting Bert is? Got a good idea. Okay, very few people. Okay, that's great, because I'm going to cover everything you need to know, right through to the really juicy bit, which is going to be how we're going to start optimizing for it. I'm also going to cover why Bert needs improving, what Bert itself is for anyone who's not sure, where it all fits into Google's information retrieval system. So, a lot to get through, so let's get on. And actually, let's start off with the basics of what term weighting Bert is and what we're talking about. And let's start by thinking about how we, as humans, understand context. So, if you're working in a store and somebody comes in and asks for Nike running shoes, you understand straight away that they're specifically asking for Nike. That's important. You're not going to go off and find them some running socks. They want running shoes. But you also understand that if you don't have anything that's specifically Nike running shoes, but they are Nike shoes that could be used for running, that's still relevant, right? And you understand that if somebody comes in and asks for Nike running sneakers, that's basically the same thing. And until recently, Google were very bad at understanding that in the same way as humans do. They wouldn't understand the importance of individual words, but also sequences of words like running shoes. Running shoes is more important than running or shoes on its own. It has a different meaning, right? So, term weighting Bert is a statistical solution. It's a statistical model that's basically going to be a bolt-on to the Bert, which is already part of Google's information retrieval system. So it's been developed by Google, by researchers at Google, so with an eye to introducing it into Google's algorithm. And they explained it in a paper called End-to-End Query Term Weighting. It's a good read. You can read it if you want to. I've read it in detail, so you don't have to though. And we're going to look at that a little bit more later on and what the findings of that were. But the really important thing is that term weighting Bert is going to help Google think more like a human, a step further than Bert has been able to take it. So decide what is relevant to showing the results and also what order to show them in the results. So hopefully you can find what you want more quickly if you're a user. It's going to massively improve Google's understanding of search intent. And the reason for that is that it's able to understand, to some extent, the importance of words and sequences of words, like the ones we were looking at in that example. Whereas Bert only really deals with word pieces, so bits of words, and a little bit more on that later on. But first, let's get back to what is the problem that Google are actually trying to solve here. So Bert came out, it rolled out globally in 2019, and at the time it was meant to help Google understand intent better than ever, bringing AI, natural language processing, into Google in a way that hadn't been before. And Google said at the time it's going to grasp the subtle nuances of language that computers don't quite understand the way humans do. So that's the end goal of Bert. The problem is that a lot of people, probably a lot of people here, believe that the quality of results has got worse over the last couple of years. And it's more difficult now than ever to find what you're looking for. And that's the opposite of what Bert was supposed to achieve. Now, sometimes it's individuals who you'll see in forums and so on who have a particular example of something that's not quite working right. But also there's publications writing about the fact that Google isn't as good as it used to be. And of course, Google are concerned because there are other search engines being developed. There's things like Perplexity based search engine, which a few people are trickling to, but they don't want that to become a flood, so they've got to keep on improving. Now, the problem for us as SEOs is, we've all been there where we have a great piece of content. It's helpful content. It matches the intent perfectly. It's really useful, has new information that doesn't exist elsewhere, and some spammy piece of content that's just, AI rehashing what's already out there somehow is ranking above us when we know it shouldn't. So hugely frustrating for us as well. But is it just that us SEOs like to complain and it's an imagined problem rather than a real one? Well, there's a paper that's come out this year, and some researchers have looked at this and found that there is more spam content within the results, more AI-generated content with no human input. But they also found that that's the case for all search engines, not just Google. And this isn't a problem due to Bert. Bert hasn't caused the problem, but at the same time, it hasn't fixed it in the way that Google hoped it would. And there is more spam in the results, and Google need to fix this. So the solution is term weighting. And it's important to mention that Bert does do some weighting. It weights word pieces, so elements of words. And we'll explain why it only does word pieces and not whole words in a minute. But when you can weight terms, you will get much better results. Back before there's any sort of weighting, one of the main things that decided the order of the results was whether candidate documents, or rather web pages, matched more of the elements of your search term. So if it's closer to matching that, it would come up higher. But that meant that if you're searching for something like where can I get great Korean barbecue in Brighton, if it focused on the get great and Korean part, then maybe you'd get results which weren't anything to do with Brighton. Or if it focused on the barbecue in Brighton part, maybe you'd get results that weren't Korean, or maybe you'd just get a recommendation to go down to B&Q. Once you bring in weighting and understand what the important terms are and important sequences of words, importantly, then you're going to get much better results. So the fact that it needs to be a Korean barbecue, it needs to be in Brighton. These are important elements. And also Bert is able to expand out the query and understand other words are relevant to give it more context. So it might add restaurant, for example, and know the Korean barbecue, you're looking for a restaurant. And so it makes sure that those documents that are coming up to the top probably have restaurant in or another synonym of that as well. So, as promised, I'm going to explain what words, n-grams, and word pieces are. Well, I think we all know what words are, right? N-grams are those sequences of words. Although an n-gram can be one word, which would be a unigram, it can be two words, a bigram, three words, a trigram, and so on. Word pieces are basically breaking language up into its constituent parts, which is done for efficiency. And so in this example here of I wanted a newer daily newspaper from the newsagent today, I want to get the newest one tomorrow. Don't worry, it's not supposed to really mean anything, but it's got the word new in several times within other words. So that's one word piece, as is agent and paper and so on. And so new only needs to be analysed once as a result. It may be upweighted because it's in there several times. If this was a search term, this only needs to be analysed once. And this means that for each language that Bert supports, it's able to do that with a database of about 30,000 word pieces, is what Google have told us. Now, as adult humans, we probably know on average around 35,000 words. So it doesn't seem like that much of a saving. Although if we don't know a word, we can look it up. Bert needs to be able to cover the whole kind of range of language. But the big problem really is that as humans, we probably understand 10 million or more n-grams or sequences of words. We understand it without even really consciously thinking about it, as in the example earlier. And we can identify phrases, we can identify sayings. We understand that two words together or three words together mean something more than the individual words. But that's very difficult to replicate in natural language processing. You'd need to create a massive high-dimensional neural network with 10 million nodes in, and each of those would need to have a relationship to the other 10 million. So imagine how many connections that would be. So even, the offline kind of deep learning that's been set up elsewhere that isn't being used in things like search, even that would struggle to ever be as big as this, or at least for the time being. So let's talk a little bit more about how BERT works and why it's been designed the way it is. So BERT, bidirectional encoder representations from transformers, of course. But the important thing you need to know is it's a deep learning-based lexical retriever for natural language processing. It's used quite a big kind of range of training material. And it looks at training material and it understands the relationships between those different word pieces, those 30,000 word pieces. It understands all of them in regard to each other from that training material. Excuse me one second. And then each word piece is mapped to other word pieces to understand that relationship. So let's look at what that actually means when you make a search. So let's say you're searching for both, say, noise cancelling headphone with microphone and Bluetooth. And you notice there's only phone in there once because it's the same word piece being used twice. So it breaks it down into those word pieces. And then what it also does is expands out the queries, like we mentioned earlier. And it weights all of those word pieces in terms of how important they are by understanding things like the context, the meaning, where they are within that phrase, and taking the information from that database to understand better. So that maybe looks something like this. This is a very simplified version, but you can see some of the arrows are bigger because they're stronger relationships, and so some of these word pieces are going to be weighted more highly as being more important to that term than others. And let's look at where BERT currently sits within Google's information retrieval system. So the basics of how search engine works, probably all know. So Google crawl, they find content, they add it to the index. You make a search, documents that match from the index, in other words, web pages that match, get pulled out. The algorithm decides which order to put them in, and you get a search engine results page. Okay, let's take out the crawling part because that's not really relevant. But when you search, actually, there's a few other steps that are happening as part of this or subparts of this. So the first thing that happens pretty much is your search query goes to BERT, and BERT identifies those word pieces and weights them, expands out the queries, and then that's what's getting compared against the database, against the index. And then those documents then go into a scoring mechanism. And a scoring mechanism is a really important part of Google's information retrieval system because that's where those weightings are taken into account. Each candidate document, each web page that is potentially going to show in the results gets a score based on how many of the word pieces it matches and the weightings of those word pieces. And then obviously there's lots of other ranking factors that then get added on by the ranking algorithm as well, and you finally get a search engine results page. So that's how BERT works without term weighting BERT. Now, term weighting BERT can be seen as a bridging solution, a statistical bridge, if you like, between BERT that's been set up to be fast and efficient, but sometimes misunderstands because of that, and then deep learning with much bigger systems, much bigger databases, which are slow, they're expensive, they're really not great for the environment because of the amount of electricity, amount of computing power they consume. So what term weighting BERT doesn't do is just create a different database. It uses the existing BERT one, but it has a statistical solution to get better results. And let's look at how that works in the case of our search query again. So term weighting BERT comes after BERT. So BERT's already identified the word pieces. Term weighting BERT identifies those n-grams, those sequences of words or individual words that are important within that. It then simply takes the weightings that BERT's already come up with and applies those to the n-grams. So an n-gram that has, several word pieces that are all up-weighted will have a higher weighting. Now, it seems very simple. It almost seems so simple that it shouldn't work. We'll get to the paper in a second and see whether it does. And then term weighting BERT basically then fits in there straight after BERT. So you then have weighted n-grams. And then when you get to the scoring mechanism, at that point, those weightings for the n-grams can be used as well. And so documents that match those sequences of words that are up-weighted are more likely to come out on top. Importantly, there is almost certainly a feedback loop. There's lots of things here we're talking about which Google don't tell us exactly how these things work. But we are 99% sure, I'd say, that there is a feedback loop that Bert already uses. So it uses user signals, so things like click-through rate. For example, if everybody is clicking on the third result, then that gets back to Bert, which realizes, oh, well, maybe there's something not quite right there because the third result should have been first if that's the one that everyone's clicking on. And it understands there's a value, a ranking loss, and that allows it to learn and improve. And this is going to be the same for term weighting Bert. Because within this paper, end-to-end query term weighting, that end-to-end part refers to that feedback loop. So it can get the information back. It doesn't specifically mention user signals, but that is basically something it could use. In the case of carrying out this research, what they actually looked at was they had a list of the ideal results, and then they compared the results to what they thought the results should be. And they compared it to Bert on its own, and they compared it to other bigger deep learning systems. And they found that overall, the precision of term weighting Bert was better than both, partly because even those bigger systems can't cover all 10 million or more n-grams that might come across. It's particularly good for top 10 and top 100 results, which is what we care about and what Google cares about. So really strong results, and it also performs really well for terms up to at least 10 words long. So it's good at understanding those longer tail terms as well, which is really important for us and what impact it's going to have for us. So, a really important question, is Google using term weighting Bert now? My opinion is it probably is, at least a bit, and I would say, why wouldn't it? The paper is pretty clear that it improves things, it's a better quality of results, and it fixes a major flaw that Google, are very aware of in terms of the quality of their results. Plus, if you're wondering what this graph is, a lot of people put down fluctuations in SERP's volatility, as shown here from a graph from Albaru, starting in late June into July and August. A lot of people think that may have been because term weighting Bert was actually added right back then, back in the summer. So does that mean that that's it? Google have rolled this out and this is as good as it's going to get? Well, they can still tweak it. Like I say, it might be at the moment that with that scoring, they use some weightings based on word pieces and some weightings based on term weighting Bert's n-gram weightings. And so they can adjust how important those different factors are over time. But once they get more feedback loop data, then it's easier for them to be certain that it's accurate and again, turn up the dial on how important it is as a ranking factor. Also important to remember that this is actually very simple and therefore it's very easy for other search engines to copy. If they read the paper, they've got most of the information they need on how to do this and go and build their own version quite quickly. So maybe some of them already have introduced it. So does this mean that n-grams are the new keywords? If it did, that'd be a great headline. Unfortunately, I don't think that is the case. Keywords aren't dead completely, but they've been limp for a while, and maybe this is just another step in their deterioration in importance. But it doesn't mean that n-grams are a replacement for keywords. But having Google understand n-grams more, though, is significant for us as SEOs. We need to optimize for intent first more than ever. We should already be doing that already, right? So this is why, for us good SEOs, it's good news. But we need to really make sure that we're understanding the intent of searches because Google are getting better at understanding it. And I personally think that results have got better since the summer, and that could be because of term weighting Bert. And what I'm searching for is understood better. So if you're just keyword stuffing and your content isn't delivering, that's not going to work. The other thing that's significant for us is that although Bert was already expanding out queries, this is going to mean that those expanded queries are going to be better weighted. So you might get more competition from relevant content which doesn't match the same keywords. But that's also, you can compete for other keywords as well. Also, I think as users get used to the fact that they can use more natural language, they will do that. And so you maybe get more long tail natural language type searches. So, are you ready for term weighting Bert? Well, you're going to get less competition from irrelevant results. That's the really good news, unless you are the irrelevant result. So you need to start putting yourself in the shoes of your searchers, and hopefully we're already doing that to some extent, but that is a core part of what we have to do for this update and for many other Google updates. You need to make sure you are understanding intent. So understanding what is ranking at the moment, understanding why it's ranking, what is gaining visibility, which type of sites, which type of content is gaining visibility, and what are they doing well. The other opportunity to understand intent better is to look at search generative experience. So you can get, set up in labs, use a VPN if you're in a country where you don't have access yet, and look at what Google is showing for SGE results to try and understand what they think the intent is. And you can, to some extent, optimize for 4 n-grams. So, 6 different ways to search for the same thing, but there's one common n-gram across them. And maybe all of these have very little search volume. You're not going to create a new page for each of them, but you can create one page and optimize well for this and potentially have visibility for all of those. And then we have to stay optimized. So if we take the example of cryptocurrency, back in 2012, people searching for that head term wanted to know what it is, if it's a scam. By 2017, maybe they're interested mostly in Bitcoin, want to start investing. If you look at the SERPs now, there's a news carousel, there's prices, the intent has changed. So for your most important terms, every 3 to 6 months, you should be checking what is changing in the SERPs and whether you need to update your content or create new content. And also consider, is the intent different in different countries? Because a lot of the time it changes at a different speed in different countries. Even if it's the same language, it doesn't mean that the same terms are going to have the same intent in every country where you're trying to optimize for. So just to sum up quickly, it is great news for us as users of search engines. It's going to be easier to find the results we're looking for. We're not going to have to try and tailor our searches again and again to try and find what we're looking for. And that's good news for Google, in case any of us were worried about Google in this, because people will keep on using Google as a search engine. Also, those spammy results that were at the top before, they're going to have to just pay and buy ads instead. So good news for their revenue as well. And lastly, for us SEOs, for us good SEOs, this is great news. We should be getting more relevant, qualified traffic, even from terms we haven't optimized for. And we don't have to try and play games of going after those irrelevant terms anymore. Thank you for listening. I've been Dave Cousin. Do get in contact with me if you've got any questions on social, but also feel free to come and find me today if you want to chat any further. Thank you very much.
Demand sphere. Limitless visual insights from the SERPs. Unlimited dashboards and users. Easy to use and easy to scale your growth to new levels.
Monthly reporting making you want to shove sharp things up your nose? Try Dragon Metrics, the all-in-one SEO software with mind-blowing reporting tools.